The year was 2011. The seventh generation of video game consoles were nearing their twilight years. The human race was preparing for the following year's apocalypse, in which a sweaty John Cusack would run away from lava for several hours, and people were listening to dubstep
and lying to me about enjoying it.
But in amongst the innocence of the early 2010s, Sega sought to publish a game with big potential. One that, if it made the splash in the cultural pan they were hoping for, could finally open up the general video game consuming masses to the money-printing giga-nerd property that is the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
In the grim darkness of the 41st century, there is only war. But in the grim darkness of now, there's money! So you see where they were going with this.
It being 5 years into the PS3 and 360's lifespan, third-party developers were doing what third-party developers often do and were aping the big hits of the time to guarantee themselves a success, no matter the property. Your Uncharted's, your Gears of War, your God of Wars.
Jesus Christ, humans just love suffering, don't we?
These were the blueprints to look at for what their kids were buying and playing at the time. And with their next game's success came the promising venture of a new franchise, as Sega and some reviewers would hope. Alas, as any sort of paint-by-numbers art, at the very best you can end up with a functional result. Yes, we understand that you did your research and copied the best, but you need to achieve more than painting inside the lines to capture people's imaginations.
Heresy!
And that is essentially the legacy of 2011's Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. But in amongst the middling reviews, there is a greater story. Space Marine still holds a soft spot amongst many Warhammer fans with its chunky, simple gameplay, suitably manly voice acting,
Was that supposed to hurt?
and complete disregard for orcish rights. Enough of a soft spot that, hilariously, Sega's ambitions of turning Space Marine into a video game franchise were correct. They probably just weren't expecting a sequel to take 13 years to be released, and for all that money to go to a completely different publisher. Space Marine 2, set to release in September of 2024, seeks to be far more ambitious technologically as it adopts World War Z's Horde system. Originally used to simulate hundreds of insect-like undead piling their way into shopping centres, like the start of Black Friday, come September 2024, it will be used to simulate hundreds of insect-like alien thingies piling on top of each other in some sort of equivalent alien capitalist shopping rampage. In the meantime, however, about 10 hours worth of gameplay and a Steam Deck taught me there is a sliver of inspiration buried deep within the paint-by-numbers repetitive game design of 2011 Space Marine that makes me understand why, 13 years on, a seemingly unremarkable third-person shooter still has so much love for it. But not so much love that I am stupid enough to pay $60 full for a PC port of a 13-year-old game.
I mean, call me crazy, but I feel like charging $60 full for a 13-year-old video game is something that, well, dare I say, Sega, something a goddamn heretic would do. If you, like me, know basically nothing about Warhammer, this game does very little to tell you what the hell is going on.
What is the Imperium? What is a Space Marine? What is the Inquisition? Why are all the orcs Cockney?
Get off my ship, Space Marine!
Well, you know why they're Cockney. Cockneys are evil.
You played Killzone, you've watched Bronson, they're bonkers, the lot of them.
Back of my legs, my arse, on my arse cheeks, on my arse. Bloody my arse, you fucking
Space Marine!
Funnily enough, one of my best friends loves all this nerdy shit, so I've already inhaled enough second-hand Warhammer for me to have a passing understanding on some of the people and events in this universe. I know enough to understand everything sucks and everybody is fighting all the time. Why? I have no idea.
They don't have internet, so I'll simply assume they're bored, and this is the best way to occupy yourself when your universe hasn't invented YouTube or Minecraft yet.
I want to design games and stuff, and a friend of mine said if I give him £750, he'll put this game, he'll make it happen for me, but it's got to be cash.
But the idea of exploring a world that is so vast and unknown that you're left a little bit in the dark has a certain appeal to me. As of late, I've been inundated with media that has battered my brain so much with lore and backstory, I've retroactively fallen a little bit out of love with some of my old favourites. I love God of War, but with Valhalla I almost feel like I've been at an 8-week anger management retreat with Kratos. I know everything about the guy now, his fears, his wants.
His strange obsession with that one character from Stargate SG-1.
And so some of the allure has started to wash away. And as much as the mystery of not knowing everything contributes often to great storytelling, Warhammer 40,000 gives the player so little to work with that feels less like the world is a mystery and more like you've gotten dropped into a random book in the over 400 novels in the 40k universe.
Oh, and that's not a mistake on my part, by the way. There are over 400 novels in this one Warhammer universe alone, and I am willing to bet none of them are as entertaining as simply shooting green people in the face.
And the first 4 books, they are chronological, so that's easy. But things get interesting when you get to book 5.
Strangest of all about this game's refusal to let the audience in on any of the juicy lore-related goods is that it was the perfect avenue into the world of angry bald men and angrier green bald men. Warhammer 40,000 was first released in 1987, and even me, a relatively nerdy boy, open to the world of ridiculous fantasy,
And dwelt in Erisea, within sight of Valinor, and many of the Sindar went over the sea also. Okay, when does Aragorn get a gun? What are they talking about?
I have no idea where you would start. In the year 2011, what better way to introduce this massive universe of 40k to new players but under the guise of a sleek Gears of War style third-person shooter? Do you want to know why everybody's fighting? Well, now's your chance. And the marketing would seem to indicate that this is what the devs' intentions were as well. With video featurettes highlighting our protagonist's voice actor, the legitimately famous and well-regarded follically challenged sex symbol that is Mark Strong.
So, with the spirit of the 2011 Warhammer Luddite embraced within you, me and my little friend here are going to explain the plot of Warhammer 40k Space Marine as it happens to you. Some are more excited about the 41st century than others, and that's okay.
You play as Captain Titus Andronicus, leader of a squad of Space Marines. What is a Space Marine?
The game doesn't tell you. Make it up.
You and your squad are sent to the planet Who Gives a Fuck to secure a big old robot because it's expensive as hell and the good taxpayers of the Imperium ain't paying for another one. An endless swarm of who else big old angry orcs are overtaking the lands, and my god do they want them big robot toys. But who are the orcs and why are they being such a bunch of dickheads?
No idea, but they are orcs, I guess, so what do you expect? Sorry orcs, racism is real.
After an hour or two of massacring green men with your heavy metal brethren, you find an evil-looking space wizard known as an Inquisitor. Jordan, I don't know Warhammer. What's an Inquisitor?
Don't interrupt me. I'm not telling you.
The Inquisitor has made a massive gun, big enough to wipe out the orcs entirely. Captain Titus thinks big guns are cool, but the space wizard's gun is powered by something called the Warp. Jordan, what's the Warp?
You interrupt me again, I'm gonna break your legs, you understand me?
For the sake of simplicity, let's say the Warp is it's like yellow jelly babies. No one in their right mind thinks they taste good,
And if they do, they probably got something wrong with them.
as such, the use of yellow jelly baby arts are frowned upon by all cultures in this universe. And so we warn the Inquisitor that, hey, that's kinda dodgy, but at the same time, guns are cool, so we just move on. Eventually, we find the power source of the morally grey mega gun, and the Space Wizard takes worrying note of our resistance to the intense power of the jelly baby battery. Captain Titus does not know why he's resistant to the warp, but he's a pragmatic type of action figure looking guy, so he says, I don't know, don't worry about it, and we move on. We then kill lots more orcs through nondescript wastelands for several hours. Like, thousands of them. Seriously, it's an absolute genocide. It gets really quite worrying if you think about it for too long. Eventually, we reach the jelly baby gun itself, and oh no, using the evil jelly juice has opened a portal to the yellow jelly baby dimension, where everybody's favourite flavour of sweeties is lemon.
Because they're all heretic scum.
The Primarch jelly nemesis emerges from the lemon dimension and greets our Inquisitor escort as he makes it clear he had been converted to the dark side of the Force, and then gets all his purple bits absorbed, because he summoned Satan. Rookie mistake. You then cease your orc genocide to begin a demon genocide. You then go to some other places that I've forgotten all about. You jump on a robot the size of a skyscraper to shoot a magical tower where the demons are getting the train to. You do not get to do anything cool with the robot, by the way. You just jump on its shoulder and then it fires a gun and a cutscene. Your bald friend gets stabbed right through the back by the Jelly Baby Lord. As the big finale of the game, you then fight the Jelly Baby Lord himself, and by fight I mean you do some QTEs while falling, and then win the game. And now that the game is finished, something interesting finally happens. The other person in your squad that I did not remember the name of until I went back to get footage, it's Leandros by the way, thinks you a traitor to the Great Strawberry Empire, as your resistance to the warp would indicate you are the enemy, a heretic that cannot be trusted.
I am no heretic. You lie!
As such, Captain Titus is taken away by the Inquisition to be interrogated or imprisoned or something, even though he saved the day, and that is the moment the game leaves you on. Real bold narrative move in a game where largely nothing of interest happens, to end on what any other story would consider the end of Act 1. You know, usually where the impetus of the game's narrative kicks off in full and the player sits up to take notice of the adventure we're about to go on. But no, that is your reward for your 8 to 10 hours of video gaming. The idea of a cool story.
Maybe. One day.
The narrative in isolation is as dull as can be. It strives to do nothing and achieves it with ease.
Did you hear that? You know what that was? That was an accidental limerick. My talent, boundless.
But if I had nothing to talk about, I probably wouldn't have made a video about it. And as it turns out, the performances in Warhammer are strong enough that what tiny amounts of characterisation there is was enough for me to, at the very least, perk up on the infrequent occasion when characters do decide to speak to one another. Bald sex symbol and United Kingdom exchange programme Stanley Tucci is marvellous as Captain Titus and portrays a real steadfast honour as a walking penis in armour. The whole cast manages to flesh out a limited world of characters that are all entrenched in Imperium propaganda and yet somehow manage to portray all that brainwashed existence with a surprising amount of noble dignity.
This day is getting interesting.
That includes your old friend who gets mortal combated, and Myra, the only regular human in this game, who isn't infinitely shitting themselves out of the fear of death, or because they're in awe of your massive gothic high tops. I understand that the Empire of the 41st century is a terrible rule under which no happiness can exist, and I assumed that the constant "for the Emperor blah blah blah" chatter of every characters you walk past would be the inane babbling of a brainwashed populace. But, interestingly, everyone seems to be remarkably at peace and confident with the Emperor and their place in this giant Imperium, even if it is ruled by some mysterious 10,000-year-old man who's basically an undead psychic zombie god.
I think. I don't know, I tried watching lore videos, but watching Warhammer fans describe the lore on YouTube is as challenging as that sentence made it sound.
Let's talk about the iconic chainswords from 40K.
Yeah, I'd rather we didn't.
And while Titus is a super soldier engineered for the purpose of carrying out whatever crusader-like antics his zombie god emperor wants, he's portrayed as a very pragmatic man amongst it all.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Try to keep up.
He was brought up by a cult, and he does do their culty bidding, but he understands he's his own man, and cares more about his people coming out of the other side of the century okay than he does following the word of the Emperor to the nth degree. In a world where everyone's either in a cult, dead, a demon, an orc, or an undead zombie robot, and that's a real race I didn't make up.
I say real. It's all made up. Spoilers.
It's a piece of characterization that somehow makes me want to stay a little bit longer in this absolute hellhole of a world. And, if we're lucky, something that will be explored further in the soon-to-be-released sequel, even if I won't be returning to voice the protagonist this time.
Sidonis. Sidonis. Are you a dirty boy?
Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine is 2011 video games in a bottle. It's Gears of Warhammer.
Let me get a little bit sciencey with you here. This game, much like the magic of atoms in the real world, is mostly empty space.
But also like said atoms, the matter that is there is the magic that keeps it all interesting, which is a very overwritten way of saying,
this game's kinda empty, but I like it anyway.
The vast majority of the 8 hours it will take you to shoot, stomp and slice your way through a worrying amount of green people and then some red people are taken up by walking through empty and often exceptionally bland corridors, broken up every now and again by a turret section or joyous jetpack segments where you go full Buzz Lightyear and squish heretic scum from the skies.
And I can fly.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
That is the gameplay loop that will be driving you through your vague as all hell character objectives. And it makes me wonder how much of a classic Space Marine would it became if they added in some more characterisation, character banter, and 2 small other game mechanics to split up the pacing like traversal, puzzles, or a mini-game where you have to get a 7.5 foot tall Space Marine to tie his shoelaces without falling over.
Senonis, as my battle brother, I call on you to pull the other lace, and then we'll get a third guy, and he'll do the loop. Oh, fucking hell. Jesus Christ, I should have wore sandals.
Do you feel self-conscious about your massive muscles and ridiculous body mass? So did I. This was me before the Imperium weight loss program.
It's a loop that can feel depressingly empty if you're not ready for it, and sure enough, the first time I played this game was 10 years ago, and I played it for an hour and never touched it again. But almost surpassing words entirely, there is still something here, even if that something is not very big. We've got good chunky guns, most of which fulfill useful niches, like the classic default bolter, essentially the Space Marine's AK-47, that gets progressively upgraded throughout the game from satisfying machine gun to big juicy armour piercing machine gun, las cannons that completely delete big enemies at long range, storm bolters to turn tightly packed groups of orcs into a delicious Mediterranean style orc based hummus.
Worry not, Captain. I've saved some
hummus
for you.
And the grenade launcher to interrupt small packs of enemies and disrupt shielded guys. There are some duds, but the good weaponry can carry enough of the orc slaying fun time that it's easy enough to forgive the chaff amongst the arsenal. We've also got progressively more powerful melee weapons, beginning with the cartoonishly chunky and I'm sure tactically useless knife, through to the chainsword, big old fantasy power axe, and finally a warhammer that's
That's the name of the game. It's so amazing, even the focus didn't know what to do.
that is most often used with a jump pack for the aforementioned Buzz Lightyear experience. The hammer is the only time the game gets a little bit smart with its combat design, as it's immensely powerful, but it's also so massive even a roided up Space Marine can only use his sidearm while wielding it. Strangely, that's the only melee weapon with a trade-off. You have the opportunity throughout the game to swap between the chainsword and the axe, but as far as I can tell, the axe is better in every way, apart from losing multiple cool points for simply not being a combination of a chainsaw and a sword. And all of that is everything you need to know about the gameplay of Space Marine. It is a real piece of 2011 bread and butter game design. It's nice bread, and tasty butter for sure, but this ain't no complex 5-star meal.
For 2 more.
There you go, as if you need to know that. Fuck off.
You get the classic God of War rage mode where you can slash harder, or slow down time while aiming, but somehow, even 13 years on, the satisfaction that comes from grinding fictional enemies with Cockney accents into paste with guns does not dissipate. But this simplistic, low-ambition gameplay loop that defines a lot of 7th generation console games I've discovered with Space Marine is what I will call from now on the ultimate Steam Deck fodder. I had saved up some cash and for Christmas grabbed myself a Steam Deck OLED, and my god, is it some of the best money I've ever spent. Everybody knows these things are amazing, and they're right, so I won't go on about it. But the accessibility of being able to play any of these 10-plus-year-old games anywhere, alongside simple gameplay loops that don't require 100% of your brainpower, is a marvellous combination. Do I want to fire up my entire gaming PC and sit at my desk to play a fairly competent Gears of War clone? Most of the time, no. But pop on my Steam Deck for 30 minutes or an hour in between lunch breaks or in bed? Absolutely. It's this mechanical satisfaction that can't be beat when you're in the mood for it and don't want to delve into the complexities of a Cyberpunk or some other example. It's the gameplay experience somewhere between whack-a-mole and a strategy game. Depending on your state of mind and what you're really seeking from a game at the time, the intense simplicity of Space Marine is either a video game sleeping pill or the most satisfying of ADHD time fillers you can have.
And also, who doesn't want a portable Mark Strong in their pocket 24/7? Just look at the guy.
Oh, and also the game has multiplayer. No one plays it. So the game has running. Check. Shooting. Check. People with silly sounding fake Latin names.
Drogon! Tinonos! Nemeroth.
Checketus Maximus.
But what about the sheen that holds it all together? the sheep's stomach that keeps this video game haggis held together.
I guarantee I am the only person to ever say that sentence.
I'm of the opinion that out of the triangle of gameplay, story and presentation, if you can get 2 of those categories right, you're onto, at very least, a decent game.
And if you can do all 3, then boy oh boy, we might have another Doki Doki Literature Club on our hands, folks. I know literally nothing about that game. Is it good? Is it weeb stuff? Is it
a booby game?
Leandros, have you ever played Doki Doki Literature Club? It is some of the finest poetry to ever come out of the Imperium. Kawaides.
Space Marine manages to tick 2 of those boxes, as it's dressed up in enough pretty cutscenes, gruff enough English accents,
Never trust the Inquisition!
and juicy enough fantasy gun sound effects that can carry the game along with its chunky monkey gameplay to feel memorable to play, even if 1 month down the line, like me, you can't remember what these characters' names are because everyone sounds like they were named after fake Latin superheroes. For as little meat as there are on this game's genetically enhanced bones, what's there is well cooked. They frame cutscenes with professional cinematography, have an opening where a large metal man jetpacks down from the heavens, and use a classy enough opening font that you know it's going to be some level of quality. Seriously, look at this font choice. When a game opens with a font like this, you know you're in for, at the very least, like a 7 out of 10 experience. It's not the game's lack of quality, it's the sparseness of that quality is what makes the vast majority of Space Marine very forgettable.
You lie!
On a revisit, it's easy to appreciate the great voice acting and the minute amount of characterisation one of our squad mates receive, namely Leandros as the novice who is still sticking too strictly to his Space Marine textbooks.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrowly?
But then you and that same squad wander through a featureless brown landscape for 90 minutes without uttering a word of importance, and it's easy to forget who, what, or why you're there in the first place. Naughty Dog has had this formula down for a while now. They know that given fun but ultimately quite simplistic game mechanics, you're going to need some engaging character banter throughout the gameplay to keep the player from falling asleep. And that's forgetting that everything you're looking at throughout those hours of,
I think I'm supposed to be killing something right now?
mission design is peak 2011, which is to say, it's brown. It was 2011. Everything was brown. If there's one aspect of a game that gives away when it was made, it was the 7th generation's allergic reaction to any sort of colour that will make you go,
oh yeah, this game came out when Gears of War was a new thing.
And I'm not sure how well that meshes with the 40K aesthetic. Space Marines are, as I understand it, near 8 foot tall, genetically engineered super soldiers who are clad in 2-inch thick armour, but somehow don't think a helmet is a priority, which results in an aesthetic that is both tactically ill-advised and visually ridiculous. And yet every time I play Space Marine, I still can't decide if the mixture of overly grim subject matter and cartoonish anatomy of both the Space Marines and the Orcs is either complete visual nonsense, like just peak comedy art direction, or some sweet and sour fusion that manages to somehow look visually coherent and, dare I say, kind of cool sometimes. On the subject of music, the setting menu indicates to me that this game does indeed have music, but there is no evidence in my memory banks of there being any, so we'll give it a pass. The only area of Space Marine that has any sort of presentational spice, the paprika sprinkled over the deliciously poached eggs that is the orc killing gameplay, are the audio logs. Very well performed audio logs, where you may in fact glean some characterisation.
If I could summon it again, contain it, control it, then perhaps I could use it to defend the Imperium.
Some sort of insight into what the people who presumably live beyond the walls of these featureless corridors do day to day, when 8 foot tall action figures with chainswords aren't chopping massive green people in half outside the local bowling club.
It's all pretty harmless. She probably kid.
Said logs are found in the form of servo skulls, a specifically Warhammer-esque thing that is not explained to the player. I cannot overstate this, by the way. There's not even a pause menu encyclopedia, which, as I understand it, Games Workshop loves making to tell you about any aspect of the universe. And so I asked my friend, hey Jordan, he's also called Jordan, why are the audio logs in the form of flying skulls? Like, I know Warhammer likes the heavy metal aesthetic, but it's a little bit on the nose, don't you think?
And he went, oh, that's because ages ago humanity was almost wiped out by AI. And so instead of using computers now, they just take dead people's brains and turn them into computers.
I'm sorry, what? I'm running around for 8 to 10 hours with no world building, apart from some audible originals scattered around the world. And there's cool shit like this the game doesn't even drop me a line about?
Wait, computers turned evil? So instead of making Skynet again, they take dead people and turn them into hard drives?
It's truly baffling how a developer manages to take a property with functionally infinite lore and not only doesn't overwhelm the player with information, but provides them none at all. I was going to call it minimalism, but that would imply there's some sort of artistic payoff for the choice. But no, it's like everyone on the dev team forgot people might not know what a Warhammer is, and assumed everyone's gran and grandad knew as much about servo skulls and the Horus Heresy as they did about World War II.
Now, of course, this was before your time, but I remember my pal Charlie. Yeah, me and him were on the front lines, and this is back when I was a wee boy, you know, I was only, what was that, I was 89 years old back then, I was just a wee lad. Yeah, we massacred so many orcs, and of course, you share toilets with them nowadays. Bunch of fucking snowflakes, if you ask me.
Luckily for me though, having a phone-a-friend power-up alongside this game makes me appreciate why it is such a classic amongst the Warhammer fans. Because it's fairly evident that if you are well into big chunky boys with big chunky toys, this game is the closest the Warhammer universe, as far as I understand it, has gotten to mainstream success. A piece of media like a Witcher 3 or a successful HBO adaptation that your average Warhammer Omega nerd can point to a normal person and go, hey, you know all that nerdy stuff that I really like? Play this and you'll kinda get it. Because trying to explain to a normal human why Warhammer is neat, and then following it with a sentence.
Now in book 387, I believe, this is where we find out where the Blood Angels aren't quite the triple agents we thought they were. Very interesting story actually, so if you remember back 14 books prior,
it's going to end you up sitting on the edge of the playground every day alongside the kid who eats paint in class.
And hey, it's that fancy army painter shit you like so much too. For any woman in the audience, which I know is statistically absolutely zero, who wants to find out what it's truly like to be a man, to live that life, to dream those dreams, then look no further than Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine.
Just like being a man, it involves a distinct obsession with violence, a lonely existence that lacks meaningful dialogue, and lacking communication that results in you being sent to prison by your best pals.
You lie!
It is a time capsule. 2011 the video game in an 8-hour consumable pill form. Depending on what you're seeking for in the moment, it could be tantamount to video game sleepwalking or a pleasant orc-slaying mindfulness exercise for ADHD. And come the final quarter of 2024, it might become the flawed beginning of an interesting new larger-than-life franchise, or just the subpar initial installment of a series that hasn't figured out how to best sell itself yet. Regardless, I think we can all agree, it's good to know that huskily voiced, emotionally repressed, balding men will have the artistic outlet we have all been dreaming of for them.
That's me!
Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine gets 5 Leandros and 1 chaos-fueled demonic invasion out of 10.
Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. It took me 10 hours to complete and about 100 hours to make a video about. In fact, this is what the timeline looked like. I'll just go over my face. This is what the timeline for this video looked like. Let me know if you played Space Marine and if you thought it was the most forgettable experience of your life. Are you excited for the sequel? Do you not really care and you just enjoyed the video? If you did, remember to like, subscribe, tell your mum about it because I'm sure she'll be fucking happy to watch a video like this. Thanks for watching, and in the words of Wesley Vissers, the Dutch bodybuilding champion, thickness guys, just look at that thickness.